In Pursuit of Truth, this is your host, Sir Patrick Mactacular. We are back and we've got some more Q posts to go through. We're going to get started right on them, so put on your possibility pants today because we've got a lot of possibilities to go through. Fist bump your neighbor and let's get started. So it's 38:56, 45 minutes after the hour of 11. Q shows us this older post from February 21st, 2018, where we see that funky flag, and I don't think that's correct. I don't think that's a right flag. Looks like something's missing there. Can you find out what it is? But this thing has always played tricks on my eyes, like I've said, and we tend to see this when Q is implying a time marker. But here they're talking about the definition of patriot and the definition of traitor. As you can read for yourself, I think you get the idea. Now, I do want to point out that we have D16 here in the JPEG and AZGAL. I'm not sure if that is maybe a tip to a profile, but this D16 made me think about December 16th. We saw quite a few posts on that day on 2019, the 16th of December. Here's one, 3685, where we saw the watch. And of course, this was originally posted on December 2nd, but we were talking about it again on December 16th. We see the EO pen, we see the watch, and we see the ledger. Q says a non-determined significance of 129 from December 2nd. Yeah, well, this was the release of the IG report. And of course, AG Barr as well as Durham both released statements at 129. So there was a lot of significance in 129. Now, I'm not sure if this JPEG here is referring that, but I just want to point that out for you here. Now we get this. The lines are drawn. And we get this stringer here, and I'm honestly not really sure. I'm still kind of fiddling around with this. There's probably a lot of different things that we may drum up here. I've been kind of breaking some of these numbers up, but I haven't seen anything incredibly definitive, but we'll see if we can work that out a little bit later. Now we have defined Renegade, which was Barack Hussein Obama's United States Secret Service code name. Well, he chose that. Why would he choose Renegade? Renegade is kind of like a traitor, somebody who goes against the cause, I guess. Defined Evergreen. Well, this is something that where the leaves always stay green, like always green. And of course, that was Hillary Rodham Clinton's United States secret code name. And we also know that this was something that we've seen a lot. We've talked so much about Evergreen, and this is a good time for me to point out, if you are newer to my channel, I highly suggest going back over all my old videos. I get, of course, thousands of emails, and I greatly appreciate it. A lot of stuff we've already covered, and it might do you some good to go just back and check them out. We've been covering Q posts for quite some time. We've been covering the topic of Evergreen for quite some time. So just to kind of express a few, we've talked about Evergreen shipping lines that has been connected with Haiti. We've talked about the CIA airlines based out of Marana. It's been around for a long time. We're going to talk a little bit more about them too. And I want to offer up another possibility with Evergreen. But we've also talked about evergreen kinds of investments, things that are constantly being reinvested into, evergreen funds, stuff like that. We've seen a lot of great evergreen connections, and hopefully we will get some sort of confirmation from Q at some point so that we can kind of dial in our search. But what we've seen is the mention quite a few different times. And of course, I did a series entitled Detroit Evergreen in regards to some explosions in the city of Detroit and the tunnels underneath. You can check out my videos entitled Detroit Evergreen 1 and 2 if you've not seen those. But I highly suggest going back and checking some of that out if you want a little bit more background on that. But like we know, and the Q is pointing out here, this was Hillary Clinton's United States Secret Service code name. So this has to do with Hillary Clinton. This has to do with Obama somehow, or at least that's what Q is pointing our attention to. Non-standard definition. Okay, so we need to look somewhere else, right? Think depopulation. The silent war continues. Q. Okay, so my goal today is really to just offer up some possibilities for you to consider. I want you to understand that just because I'm offering up possibilities doesn't necessarily mean that I'm 100% behind them, but I want to offer you up as many different possibilities as we can think of. But let's start off with the obvious, which is this Evergreen Airlines. Now, we already know that this is a CIA-owned airline. This has really been no secret for quite some time. This is from a blog entitled humansarefree.com from January 2020, and I just want to point that out because there's obviously some opinion in here, but a lot of this, of course, is fact. Evergreen Air is a CIA front company for chemtrail operations within the U.S., based out of Miranda Air Park near Tucson, Arizona, and McMinnville, Oregon, near Portland. And if I didn't pronounce that correct, don't bother sending me tons of emails. It's okay. You'll be all right. A major missing piece of a grand conspiracy has been targeted by a drunk pilot in a small town 30 miles east of the Pacific Ocean in Oregon is the center of a major global operation. So they talk about this guy who ended up kind of, while he was drunk, he ended up sort of kicking down the details in regards to this airline and what they were really doing. The slurred revelations confirm suspicions that Evergreen International Aviation is part of the major crap dump on the planet. Chemtrails made up of aluminum, barium, and other ingredients contribute to respiratory ills and change the acidity of the soil. Okay, so remember, in the Q post, we were just talking about thinking depopulation. That would be a great way to do it, right? Evergreen works from over 100 bases and employs 4,500 people. Delford Smith privately owns the company. They admittedly perform for the CIA. Evergreen was given a no-contest bid that gave them all the facilities in Miranda, Arizona that previously belonged to CIA's Air America, Pinal Air Park, Arizona. Okay, so we can already smell clown right there because that's essentially what Air America was too, right? And for those of you who don't know, Miranda, Arizona, I don't know what it looks like now, but it used to be nothing but desert. I'm sure it's all built up now. But of course, it would be a great place to house this, right? The security at the Pinal site is said to be as severe as that of Area 51. It is run as a military base where one lost pilot got an armed escort immediately off the operational base. The 10-year pilot said it was nothing like he has ever seen. Evergreen International Aviation brags of their planes that have 7 times the capacity of other firefighters. One can carry 20,000 gallons. Okay, well, these are pretty souped up planes, right? And I have a feeling that they were, of course, running drugs and guns back in the day too, but it does seem that they have long been connected to this chemtrail situation. Now let me take you down a little bit further here. Evergreen Public Relations Propaganda Spokesman is handled by WPP, run by Council on Foreign Relations member Philip Lader. And of course, once we see the Council of Foreign Relations, we can already tell who the people are that want to spray barium and aluminum on our faces. He worked under the present head of the CIA, Leon Panetta, as White House Deputy of Staff under, Bill Clinton. So there is our Clinton connection. Philip Lader is an inside authority on international affairs and business. He is the non-executive chairman of WPP Group, senior advisor to Morgan Stanley International, and a board member for think tank Rand Corporation. Now, I can make a whole video on the Rand Corporation, but this think tank is a very, very sketchy think tank. And they also deal with a lot of the military-industrial complex. He is also a trustee of UC Russell, largest aluminum company in the world, the British Museum, remember that museum, and St. Paul's Cathedral Foundation. Okay, so we've got museums, which probably house artwork, and the cathedral, which probably involves the church. Okay, so that's the obvious connection right there, but let's talk about a few things that maybe aren't so obvious. Now, if you'll remember, Q was talking about the standard definition for Renegade, but the non-standard definition for Evergreen, which led me to think about this, used to describe a legal agreement that will automatically renew unless one of the people or businesses involved officially ends it. Evergreen Clause Provision Agreement. An important goal for every agent is an Evergreen Clause, which provides for continuing commissions after an agreement ends. Evergreen letters of credit may be rolled over indefinitely until the issuing bank provides a written notice of its final expiration. Okay, so we may be talking about money here. Not really sure. I want to thank Anon who sent me this here, and I found some interesting things in this. This is from apolitical.co. how Cleveland's cooperatives are giving ex-offenders a fresh start, and this was from September 19, 2017. Cleveland is harnessing the spending power of its institutions to launch new cooperatives, providing jobs and wealth-building opportunities for ex-offenders and low-income people. The 3 environmentally sustainable co-ops, whose employees earn well above the minimum wage and can take a stake in their companies, act as suppliers to anchor institutions rooted in the city, such as universities and hospitals. The model hopes to spur a breakthrough in Cleveland, which has struggled with depopulation and economic stagnation. The 3 Evergreen cooperatives employ around 120 people from the low-income University Circle area. In 2016, they generated a combined revenue of $6.3 million, with the average employee earning $12.56 per hour, well above the Ohio minimum wage of $8.15. The Evergreen Cooperative Laundry, the first to launch in 2009, achieved a 10% profit margin in 2016, with its co-op owners receiving bonuses of up to $4,000. 10 of the laundry's employees were once incarcerated, while 51% have a criminal record. Evergreen Energy Solutions also launched in 2009 and has begun making profits, while the third cooperative, Green City Growers, opened in 2013 and is expected to break even in 2017. Okay, so I found this very interesting, this Evergreen Cooperative Corporation. Democracy Collaborative, Cleveland Foundation, City of Cleveland. Some interesting things going on here. And it seems like it's a, outwardly it seems like it's a pretty interesting thing. But when we start hearing about green companies, we start hearing about diversity, we start hearing about charity, you can't help but kind of perk your ears up, right? Now, they are wrapped up with this, obviously, this Cleveland Foundation. And I want to give you a look at this Cleveland Foundation, which is this right here. And they're talking about organizational funds. Now, I want to take you down. We are under the donor section here for the clevelandfoundation.org, and there were some really, really interesting things that they were wrapped up in. First of all, the Cleveland Baroque Orchestra, Art House, and we've talked a lot about art and kind of the art business and their relations to human trafficking. Now, I'm not necessarily implying that the Cleveland Foundation is wrapped up in that, but it was just something that perked my ears up. The Adhesion Society, looks like they're talking about science, molecular science, Alpha Omega Foundation. And then, of course, we have this curious one right here, the Adoption Network in Cleveland. Now, that's where my ears really perked up. So if you don't see where I'm going with this, ladies and gentlemen, what I've shown in my videos over the years is that we've seen a massive connection between shipping companies, which move things around. Of course, we have Evergreen Shipping that was related to Haiti. And then, of course, we also have all of these connections between adoption agencies, humanitarian organizations, usually children's homes and things like that, and their relations with human trafficking. Now, again, I am not accusing anyone of anything, but just noticing some things that this group was kind of wrapped up with. So they're wrapped up in science. They're wrapped up in medical. They do a lot of the laundry services. They basically wash linen and things like that for hospitals and hotels. Now, I'm not saying, but I'm just saying that that would be a great way for people to either stay healthy or get really sick. But let's take a look at this Adoption Foundation. And of course, more red flags came up, and you can probably see it right off the bat, being this red leash looking thing wrapped around this tree. And if you're not familiar with this seems to be some sort of MK Ultra kind of communication that we've seen over and over again with dogs and red leashes and children with red leashes and people wearing red leashes. We keep seeing these red leashes pop up through different tweets and pictures and things like that. It just seems like a very, very strange thing to put on your adoption website. What does this have to do with anything? Why are you tying a leash around a tree? But this is an Ohio family connection. And this is the network that they're talking about. And as you can see, other than that, it looks fairly innocuous. But let me take you down here, and you can see that they've got some pretty big donors here. Sherwin-Williams, Baker Hostetler, Applied Industrial Technologies, Colleague Giving, and Chemical Bank. Other than that, nothing particularly nefarious, but I will say that indeed this is very, very sketchy. Here's another group they're wrapped up with, the American Society of Andrology, which they are talking about male reproduction. And then we've got the Adhesion Society right here. And then let me take you over here to the Catholic Charities Diocese of Cleveland. This was from July 2017. The Cleveland Foundation has recently awarded Catholic Charities Diocese of Cleveland a $225,000 grant supporting our migration and refugee services. Okay, well, this is another place where we see a lot of human trafficking going on, right? This 3-year renewable grant, that's kind of like an Evergreen, was initially awarded to Catholic Charities to open the Ohio Center for Survivors of Torture in 2016, but the center has served more survivors than initially anticipated. Okay. Now, if you go over here to their donate section, you will notice that they are on the gold list here down in the bottom corner for the Charity Navigator. I've talked about this Charity Navigator often. Oddly enough, it looks to be the same star as this seal of transparency right here. And oddly enough, we've seen this star on Epstein's Island, and we've also seen it on the Evergreen Air logo. Probably just a coincidence. Now, I want to move off of the Cleveland Foundation and their Evergreen initiatives. I found the name very, very curious. I found it very curious that they were talking about depopulation. And I also found it very curious, like I just showed you, that they were related to the Charity Star Navigator, which usually leads to some very suspect charities. But they're also wrapped up in science. They're involved with a lot of different local clinics. They're involved in green initiatives. They're involved in adoption agencies, the Catholic Church, as well as the art trade. And these are all things that I've seen over the last couple of years of my research that seem to be tied in with human trafficking. Just saying, but I do want to point out that I didn't find anything nefarious about any of these groups other than those connections. Now, I do want to take you to another definition of Evergreen. Evergreen funding is a term used to describe the incremental addition of money into a business. Before a business is started or a new product is introduced into the market, the business owner or the investment bank representing the business owner will approach venture capitalists and other investors for financing. Usually, these investors will provide the company with capital in one lump sum payment. At this point, the company will invest the capital in short-term securities in order to yield interest. It is customary to make arrangements to receive venture capital funds up front. With Evergreen funding, however, investors supply the capital in incremental payments throughout the development phase of the company or product. Thus, the company receives money from its investors on a set schedule or as the need for funds arises. And like the evergreen tree is never without the green, the company needs to survive. That's another reference for Evergreen, somebody who's always got the coin, right? Evergreen. So is that what we're talking about? Are we talking about all kinds of different ventures that may need constant funding, constant funneling, constant money going through, whether it's through PACs or humanitarian organizations or whatever it might be? Could very well be, but there is another definition for you. Now, one last reference for now that I want to talk about with Evergreen is this Evergreen Services Group. Evergreen Services Group has invested in NetGain Technologies, a well-known managed services provider in Lexington, Kentucky. The companies have confirmed to Channel E2E. It sounds like the investment involves majority control of NetGain, i.e. an acquisition, through the MSP will continue to operate independently under its leadership team. Evergreen, backed by Alpine Investors, has made 12 MSP investments so far in 2018. Earlier deals have involved Wolf Consulting, Executech, Genlor, Interlaced, and Integratech, among others. The deals typically allow MSPs to maintain their existing leadership teams and continue running their businesses. Evergreen's additional financial muscle typically assists with talent, technology, and other types of investment. Looking ahead, NetGain essentially becomes a platform company within the Evergreen services portfolio. That means NetGain is large enough and well funded to make tuck-in acquisitions. Okay, so I find it very interesting that they're headquartered in Lexington, and although Q has mentioned Lexington and Concord, I'm not so sure that's the connection, but I found it very interesting. NetGain Technologies provides IT services to mid-sized businesses across the South Central United States. The company's 85 engineers and technicians hold 250 technical certifications and support more than 10,000 computer users. The company is headquartered in Lexington with offices in Chattanooga, Tennessee, St. Louis, Missouri, Little Rock, Arkansas, Louisville, Kentucky, and Cincinnati, Ohio. But this was the curious thing right here. Multiple companies have been attempting to acquire NetGain Technologies in recent months, sources across the MSP industry say. The business is highly respected and well known with private equity and MSP investors circles. So there are a few options for you there, but we know we're talking about Obama, we're talking about Clinton, and we are talking about the depopulation situation. So are we indeed talking about this Evergreen Airlines and their chemtrails? Are we talking about some sort of possible nuclear war? We don't really know, but we do know that Obama and HRC were essentially involved in this 16-year plan to bring down America, right? One was going to be the president for so long, and the other was going to do the same. And after that whole reign, it was all going to come down, and I'm sure it involved mass depopulation. Q says the silent war continues, and we've heard this reference to silent war a couple of different times. I want to point this out from Amazon here. This is entitled The Silent War by John Pena Craven. Packed with the technological details and insights into military strategy that fans of Tom Clancy relish, The Silent War is a riveting look at the darkest days of the Cold War. It reveals in gripping detail the espionage, innovative high technology, and heroic seafaring the United States employed against the Soviet Union in the battle for nuclear and military supremacy. John Craven, who shared management responsibility for the submarine-borne Polaris missile system, captures the excitement and the dangers of the times as he recounts the true stories behind some of the century's most shocking headlines and reveals harrowing episodes kept hidden from the public. All right, so you get the idea. And I want to turn you on to one more thing. The Silent War was actually a Marvel comic series. I think this was back in 2007. Yes, March 2007. And although this might seem a little bit silly, just give this a listen for a quick second. In the opening stages of the war, keep in mind this was a series, Black Bolt ordered a strike on America led by Gorgon. Although the initial mission was only to order the return of the Terrigen crystals, Jolin, a young member of the Inhumans who has plant-like powers, kills innocents in a concert hall. The Inhuman task force attempts to flee the scene, but they are stopped and defeated in battle by the Fantastic Four. Gorgon surrenders and takes the blame for the unnecessary casualties and is turned over to One. While in captivity, Gorgon is exposed again to the Terrigen mist by an American scientist. The second transformation is more disastrous, turning Gorgon into a feral beast. Black Bolt then leads a contingent of Inhumans to rescue the mutated Gorgon, attacking the Pentagon and reclaiming the crystals. S.H.I.E.L.D. responds to Black Bolt's attacks by sending Marines who have been exposed to the mist to assault the Inhuman capital on the moon, Attilan. These Marines possess abilities on par with the Inhumans, but are also dying due to cellular instability. Okay, very interesting. So although this is indeed a comic, seems like there's a few references there to real life. Now, let me point out one last thing before we move on to 3857. This was a Trump tweet from February 10th. Because of how badly they did with the impeachment hoax, AOC will primary Chuck Schumer and win, and Jerry Nadler has a good chance of losing to his far-left primary opponent. It is all getting quite interesting. Pelosi will lose the House. Again, my poll numbers great. Okay, well, interestingly enough, this is a very great troll, but we notice here in the last sentence, my poll numbers usually would say my poll numbers are great, meaning that they're missing an R. Now, is he just missing an A-R-E? Was this just a standard mistake? Not really sure, but there's an R missing. And like I pointed out on Twitter, this could be the letter R, could be the word R, not really sure. But oddly enough, we also had this tweet from a few days before that from Alexa. Alexa is that electronic spy that sits in your house and tells you how to cook food. I don't mean to be a renegade, but if you ask me to TikTok, I'm going to tell you the time. Follow me for more pop culture observations. Okay, well, maybe nothing at all, but I found it very interesting that Alexa was meaning renegade. And of course, Renegade himself came up with this tweet just today. Even if the methods are new, sowing the seeds of doubt, division, and discord to turn Americans against each other is an old trick. The antidote is citizenship, to get engaged, organize, mobilize, and to vote on every level in every election. And this takes you to an Atlantic article, the $1 billion disinformation campaign to re-elect the president. All right, well, he ought to know, right? He had himself a little Project Narwhal program that helped him do that very same thing. But I found it very interesting that Obama brought up sowing the seeds and antidote. Just saying. Oddly enough, in that Atlantic article, they are talking about President Trump and his whole campaign staff and their new headquarters and how it's so much bigger than it was when he first ran a few years back. And of course, now he's got a lot more infrastructure. And they actually refer to his whole headquarters as the Death Star. And I found that very curious because James, nobody's homie Comey, had this interesting picture from a while back. If you remember this from the interview with the New York Times, and he had his nephew's toys all set up. And if you can see right there in the foreground, those are all Star Wars toys. And I pointed out back then that not only are they Star Wars toys, but they are the Rebel Alliance. And they appear to be kind of ganging up on that little footstool right there, the hassock. And that would probably be the Death Star, because that's exactly what they were going for in the movie, right? They were all trying to disassemble the Death Star. And oddly enough, of course, James, nobody's homie Comey, has been talking about some Evergreen comments himself. You may remember this tweet from back in April 19th, 2019. So many answers. And of course, that was a follow-up tweet to a previous one that said so many questions. So there you go. There are some Evergreen references. I'm going to go ahead and move on there, but at least that will be some food for thought, something for you to bake your noodle on. 38:57, 56 minutes after the hour 11. Highly sophisticated state level attacks versus 8kun, followed by fake news attacks versus Q the next day. Coordinated? No, I imagine not. And like Code Monkey was saying over there on 8kun, this was a well-funded attack. This would have seemed to come from some sort of state level funding, it would seem. And it almost looks like this might be Chinese funded money, but whatever it was very, very sophisticated and evidently was frustrating them over there on 8kun. And of course, we saw this, really right around the same time. We saw the New York Times, WAPO, ABC, CBS. I'm sure the Daily Beast probably jumped in there, Newsweek, all jumping on QAnon. Seems like it was all going on right around the same time. Ask yourself a simple question: why? It's time to wake up. Q.
Got a flashback aside, take you back,
Taking you back to 3842. This was on February 8th, and this was roughly around the time where 8kun was getting hit. Oddly enough, Q was talking about China and Qatar and donating to our educational institutions. But they were also talking about a couple of Chinese nationals and a professor that had gotten arrested, and they were trying to smuggle biological samples back to China. Now, if you follow my channel for a while, we've also talked about foreign nationals, in particular Chinese nationals that had been busted messing with genetically modified seeds. Now, we don't know what these biological samples were, but it sounds pretty sketchy. And given the fact that Q was just talking about depopulation, and of course all these attacks, and considering that it would take a lot of money, and Q is kind of implying that this was a state-sponsored attack, it would seem that China did not like 8kun bringing up the fact that they're playing with our seeds and our biological samples. I wonder if that has anything to do with depopulation and coronavirus. Probably not. Let's move on. Post 3858, 4 minutes after the hour of 12, we get this graphic right here. It says The Great Awakening. And oddly enough, this is entitled GA, which I'm assuming is Great Awakening. And then you have a 221, and that is the same date as this post that we just showed you from back in 2018, 221. Well, let's go back and read it again. We've actually seen this before. Regarding drop, what happens when 90% of the media is controlled or owned by 6 corporations? Well, you don't get the same choice that you think you do you? What happens when those same corporations are operated and controlled by a political ideology? What happens when the news is no longer free from bias? What happens when the news is no longer reliable and independent? What happens when the news is no longer trustworthy? What happens when the news simply becomes an extension arm of a political party? Fact becomes fiction. Fiction becomes fact. When does news become propaganda? Identity creation. How does the average person who is under constant financial stress by design find time to research and discern fact versus fiction. Majority of people more prone to believe someone in power sitting behind a big brand news name? Do people, human psyche, tend to follow the majority mainstream viewpoint in fear of being isolated and or shunned? Mainstream is used for a reason, to dominate trend and opinion. If majority of people believe X, then X must be validated/true. Why do mainstream media heads within different organizations always use the same keywords and or catchphrases? Coordinated by who? Outside entity providing instructions? Do they count on the fact that people, human psyche, are more prone to believe something if heard over and over again by different trusted sources? Do echo chamber tactics provide validation/credibility to the topic/point being discussed? Threat to intellectual freedom? Would control over, and then you have of in brackets, these institutions/organizations allow for the mass control of a population's viewpoint regarding a desired topic? Read again, digest. Let's read it again. Would control of these institutions, organizations allow for the mass control of a population's viewpoint regarding a desired topic? Would control over of these institutions/organizations allow for the mass control of a population's viewpoint regarding a desired topic? So it's almost like Q wants us to read that again. Logical thinking. Why, after the election of 2016, did Democrats and media corps jumpstart a coordinated and planned divisive blitz intended to create falsehoods regarding illegitimacy of election, character assassination of POTUS through sexism, racism, every other ism? Because they knew if you hated him, then you would never pay attention to the crimes that we've been trying to take down for decades. Pre-post 2016 election, why were violent, masked terror organizations such as Antifa immediately created and funded? Why were these organizations tasked with immediate intimidation or shutdown of any pro-POTUS rallies and or events? Why were marches immediately organized to counter and silence pro-POTUS rallies and or events? Why were marches immediately organized which divided people into sex, gender, race, and isms? When you control the levers of news disseminations, you control the narrative. Control of the narrative equals power. When you are blind, what do you see? They want you divided. Divided by religion, by sex, by political affiliation, and divided by class. When you are divided and angry and controlled, you target those different from you, not those responsible controllers. Divided, you are weak. Divided, you pose no threat to their control. When non-dogmatic information becomes free and transparent, it becomes a threat to those who attempt to control the narrative and or stable livestock kept, sheep. When you are awake, you stand on the outside of a stable groupthink collective and have free thought. Free thought is a philosophical viewpoint which holds that positions regarding truth should be formed on the basis of logic, reason, and empiricism rather than authority, tradition, revelation, or dogma. This represents a clear and present danger to the constitutional republic of the United States of America. Well, I think that's very clear, and Q has posted this before, and I think you guys really understand what this means. The mainstream media would never want you to get the proper narrative because they've been really essentially cooperating with this whole thing, right? They are part of the mess. They are part of the mob. As a matter of fact, President Trump has been calling them out since day one, and it seems like he's only been stepping up his rhetoric. That, of course, reminds me of this tweet that POTUS sent out the other day, and I reposted this last night. This was from the 12th. Who are the 4 prosecutors, Mueller people, who cut and ran after being exposed for recommending a ridiculous 9-year prison sentence to a man that got caught up in an investigation that was illegal, the Mueller scam, and shouldn't ever even have started? 13 angry Democrats. Well, this Roger Stone thing is completely falling apart, and I want to just remind you that Roger Stone was a longtime colleague of Paul Manafort, and of course this would probably lead to Julian Assange and possibly even Seth Rich. Who really knows where this could go? But either way, they were trying to put this guy away hard for 9 years, and of course that didn't happen. But what I find very curious here, if you'll notice, the Mueller scam was capitalized. Of course, Mueller would be capitalized, but I found this MS interesting, and then of course 13 comes right after that, and then Angry Democrats is also capitalized. So I put here Mueller scam being MS, and then the 13 being either another M or the number 13 could either mean MSM or MS13, and then again that 13 in front of Angry being M and A. Does that make sense? M being the 13th letter of the alphabet and going with the A. Could we be talking about MSM in Massachusetts? Not really sure, but I found this very, very curious. And then, of course, I referred you to this article right here from Massachusetts Live. And this was in regards to the rally that was in New Hampshire just the other day. This was something that President Trump had said for a while, but he mentioned it again in New Hampshire, and he mentioned Massachusetts, saying that they had some weird laws over there, and he was sort of implying that in 2016 there were illegals coming across the border and voting from Massachusetts. So I found it very interesting, especially in relation to the Q post from today, and of course the tweet that he put out, which looked very curious. Oftentimes you'll see POTUS will capitalize some odd letters, so playing with some of that. A lot of people like to use gematria, but that's sort of the way that I looked at it. And then, of course, we had this from earlier, and this is from Breaking 911. And this is where POTUS says, some Republicans have said that they had hoped, or excuse me, where they ask him, some Republicans have said that they hoped you'd learn a lesson from impeachment. What lesson did you learn? Well, let's hear what he says.
That the Democrats are crooked. They've got a lot of crooked things going. That they're vicious, that they shouldn't have brought impeachment, and that my poll numbers are 10 points higher because of fake news like NBC, which reports the news very inaccurately, probably more inaccurately than CNN, if that's possible. MSDNC, and your MS, and if you take a look at NBC, now I think they're among the most dishonest reporters of the news. Okay.
So there you go, POTUS doubling down on his claim that MSM is indeed the enemy of the people, and I can't say that I blame him considering the way they've treated him for the last few years. And of course, that's the very reason we're over here on Qmap or 8kun following QAnon, because we know we're not going to get any straight information from the media. And speaking of that, let's move on to the next post at 38:59, 58 minutes after the hour 4. We get a Twitter status to ABC quote unquote news, and it takes you right here. And this is Chuck Schumer. Does anyone think it's out of the question that President Trump might order the FBI to investigate Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, or anybody else? Senator Chuck Schumer asks. That's third world behavior, not American behavior. But let's hear it from his words.
The president is claiming that rigging the rules is perfectly legitimate. He claims an absolute right to order the Justice Department to do anything he wants. And the president has, as his attorney general, an enabler, and that's a kind word, who actually supports this view. Does anyone think it's out of the question that President Trump might order the FBI to investigate Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, or anyone else without any evidence to support such an arbitrary violation of individual rights? Oh, I know, some far-right conspiratorial writer who has no credibility and who just makes things up, writes it, Fox News puts it on, Sean Hannity or someone talks about it, and then the president says investigate. That is third world behavior, not American behavior. That kind of behavior defiles that great flag that is standing above us. This is not ordinary stuff. I've never seen it before with any president, Democrat, Republican, liberal, or...
Yikes, tough words. He even pointed like that. What a tough guy he is right there. Sounds like you just projected everything the DNC did when they asked for Fusion GPS to drum up some opposition research into a duly elected POTUS. But hey, what do I know about this kind of stuff? Q says far-right conspiratorial writer who has no credibility. And then, of course, we have CS, which likely means Chuck Schumer. Maybe he's about to go away. He's in the brackets right there. Could this also be a secondary reference to CrowdStrike? Very well could be. Either way, Q says panic, panic, panic in DC. All right, Patriots, those are your Q posts for now. As always, if you like this video, please click like, share, and subscribe. Thanks to all of you who do that already. All my alternate channels are linked down below. I highly suggest joining me on one of those. This is my DropSpace right here at IPOT 1776. You can find all those linked down below in the video description, as well as my P.O. box. My email is down there if you've got information to share with me. And if you'd like to support the channel, my Patreon is linked down below. It's all in the video description. All right, kids, this is Sir Patrick Mack, and until next time, stay pursuit-y.